afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociology of religion, in today's lecture, we are going to understand non-religion and atheism. Now, before we go into the details of understanding atheism, it's very important to understand that in sociology, much of the focus has been to understand religion as a functional institution, religion as kind of ensuring morality, order in society. Now, when we try to understand religion as a sociologist, it's very important to also understand what could be non-religion. Now, there could be different ways in which we understand. Either we put religion and non-religion on a continuum, or we consider them as pole apart. Now, it is important to understand both religion, non-religion, irreligion, because they are all kind of concerned with ideas, with belief. So, let us try to understand atheism in sociology of religion. So, to begin with, we know that since the inception, the subject of religion has been studied by sociologists from the beginning, right from Marx to Weber to Durkheim. They were all trying to look into the understanding of how religion kind of is an important institution. So if we look into Durkheim, he was trying to understand the morality, the moral order that religion could ensure. So the context in which sociology was trying to problematize religion was the large-scale social changes that had taken place in the 19th century. And to make sense of the change, they were trying to use religion. Now, the attempt to understand religion was basically more or less from a functional comparative method. What kind of was left behind was to look into the other side. What if we don't have a set of ideas? It was assumed that every individual in a society would have an idea. So when Durkheim is talking about collective conscience, he's going by the assumption that everyone will have a religious belief. So what if we talk about people who do not kind of believe in a deity or in the power of the in kind of a power? So the study of sociology within kind of religion within sociology has to be located in the context in which was studied. So sociology was a discipline which was emerging, and the approach was evolutionary. So the society was seen as progressing from a simple religious society, from a kind of barter system, to a society where social structure was becoming complex and the people were becoming more rational, people were becoming more scientific. So this theory of evolution helped sociologists to make sense of religion. Now, 19th century thinkers and philosophers, they were kind of telling us that if society was progressing, then the path for progress would be from a religious society to a scientific society. So if we go into anthropologists like Fraser, Tyler, they were giving us this theory of society progressing or evolving from magic to religion to science, and therefore modernity, or with the kind of Reformation, Renaissance, Industrial Revolution happening, science, rationality, technology became the inwards, and therefore religion, supernatural, magic, these were some of the terms which were relegated to the backstage. So the belief was among anthropologists and sociologists was that people were moving away from religion, or the phrase is leaving religion and becoming more secular and scientific. Secular in the sense that they were now more concerned about doing things in a scientific, organized manner with a logical, rational explanation. Now, 19th century thinkers were more or less talking about evolutionary social change in terms of all the realm in which changes were taking place. But by 20th century, we see a return to religion, and that is Peter Berger's concept of desecularized. So, therefore, the old theory of modernity that is, modernity leads to scientific rational way of thinking, or modernity giving rise to secularization, was questioned. It was kind of asked that what about religion? If science and technology has become important, does it mean that religion is no longer valid? Does it mean that religion kind of becomes redundant? And therefore, a number of research were done, and it was kind of found out that religion as an institution was still significant in the life of individual. So it was not necessary to place modernity and secularization on a kind of pole aparts. So they could be kind of a continuum from religion to science and tradition to modernity. So when we look into the 19th century's thinkers and philosophers, we know this theory, secularization theory or thesis, was kind of very significant in understanding social change, which was resulting due to the change in science and technology, in the market, in emergence of bureaucracy, emergence of industrial mode of life, and therefore by default the significance of religion as an institution declined. Now, when we kind of have done the transformation understanding, secularization thesis has been understood, then there was a question of kind of return back to religion. And therefore, the boundaries between religion and non-religion, the understanding of what is religion or what is non-religion, the terms atheism and agnosticism is used for non-religion. The distinction between these becomes very blurred. So when we look into how we kind of conceptualize non-religion and atheism, it is important to look into three of the most important ideas. One was to place the shift of society from one particular kind of social structure to the other, that is to place it within the evolutionary social change theory. And the second is to place the understanding of atheism in the secularization theory. The third is to understand that when we kind of start talking about rationality, scientific understanding, there was also a shift from collective to individualism. So when we kind of understand secularization theory, we see that as society transits from and becomes more pluralistic, more heterogeneous. So earlier, prior to social changes, most society were homogeneous with one particular religious practice, or maybe in the West if we see one church. So it was then idea of religion was to be attached to a particular church. When modernization, secularization takes place, there is increase in a diverse group. It becomes more pluralistic. So when it is pluralistic, there are multiple ways in which one can either practice religion or not. So therefore, the understanding becomes more complicated, and there is a kind of an academic conversation shifted to the role of secularization in modern society. Secularization theory was kind of traced back to Max Weber, who in 1930 used the term to refer to the shift in individual affiliation from religious sect to high social status organization such as fraternal society and distinguished club. So here we see how religion is kind of moving to the backstage, in the sense that when we have a modern urban industrial society, there is a change in the economy. Occupational groups are changing. It is becoming more heterogeneous group. So for that, in order to kind of continue doing an economic work, the importance was to get attached to a office or a club which were more secular, in the sense that it was not kind of any affiliation to any religious group or religious organization. So secularization was seen as an evolutionary process. or in a sense of a linear building towards the removal of religion entirely from society. So as we were moving, as we are progressing, it's kind of seen as an inherent internal aspect of society that religion would kind of go back to the backstage, and science and secularization would improve. So when we look into the theory of social change, which much of the 19th century and 20th century sociologists were engaged with, these processes of secularization, modernization, this becomes very important to understand the society as an integrated social system. And to understand how society was integrated, the focus was on the normative, what was accepted as normal. So being part of a religious institution or being religious was kind of considered normative. It could also be because the number of individuals who did not have a religious affiliation or who were not engaged in religious kind of activity was comparatively larger. So then this kind of deviance from the normative was kind of considered as negative. So being kind of attached to any kind of particular religious organization was not necessarily advantageous. And therefore, we talk about the issue of authentic religiousness. Now, these are also kind of subjective terms, even the concept of belief, what one believes in, whether the belief in the deity or whether the belief in a supernatural entity or believe in something which is regulating the universe. So these subjectivity is kind of leads to a lot of uncertainty, and this for then there is a gradual trend to scientific secular thought which is more certain, which will kind of give you an answer to the question asked. Due to social change, the society was moving from primitive society. So we have already have this theory of social change which suggests, and a number of sociologists would say that society is moving from simple society, from say a community based to individual society. This concept of Gesellschaft and Gemeinschaft, community to associations, were part of all theories of social change. And when we are looking into the theory of social change, this change is being looked at two levels. One, at the level of the social system, where it is shifting from, say, simple to more complex, or what Durkheim says, from mechanical organic to organic solidarity. But it could also be at the level of individual shift. Now, the individual shift is more or less psychological, and because individuals are more engaged in economic pursuit, in kind of occupational with group which are more diverse, the shift from religion becomes kind of natural. And therefore, with modernity, industrialization, we also see the emergence of spirituality. We see the emergence of agnosticism and atheism. Now, when we look into the individual versus collective debate, we see that in the beginning or the inception of sociology, religion was kind of considered more as a collective affair. So it was not something which was to be done at an individual level. It was a community affair. So you kind of look into the definition of religion that Durkheim gives in the elementary forms of religious life, that it was kind of related to the church, a collective membership. So, and also talking about society as God. These are kind of telling us that religion was conceptualized in a collective response. Now, when we move from the simple, primitive, religious-based society to industrial, urban society, then there is the kind of concern about religion being relegated as a private affair or as individual. Now, there is the kind of subjectivity that arises. If in case one does not have a membership for, say, example, church, does not imply that the individual is religious. The individual could in his own private life be part of the beliefs and idea which is connected to Christianity. So the shift is taking place from religious field, from collective, institutional, tradition-bound religion to increasingly individual, non-institutional, and post-traditional religious form. So the researchers done in the US kind of hinted that there was a decline in membership of religious groups, sects, and therefore the idea that there is an increase towards the secular or non-religion. So this is the background or the context within which we understand atheism. Now, before we kind of know what is atheism and what significance it has, one needs to understand why study atheism. And this is an important question, that why is it important in sociology? Now, we need to understand atheism because we cannot understand faith without taking account of its absence. So, we cannot understand the history of religion without understanding how did it disappear, or why did people start leaving religion, and once they left religion, was there any kind of scope to come back? So that these are kind of valid questions, because it will again tell us about the social system as a whole. Peter Berger says that sociology of religion can no longer study religion exclusively. Why? Because that's not the only idea, or that's not the only body of knowledge which is existing in a society. Since there are multiple ways of assigning to a faith or to an ideology, so therefore it is important that when we evolve or we take part in a sociology of religion, it is important to deal with the dynamics and of contemporary non-religious culture. And the reason is also because the non-religious culture kind have increased in a so-called scientific and modern society. Now, when we look into the understanding of religion, we see that how do we know which religion do we belong, or which kind of practice do I adhere to. So it is a part of socialization process. Now, a lot of movies have kind of, in India especially, has kind of showed that there is this whole idea of your identity of a religious group is kind of subjective, because it is learned through by individual, by parents, by peer group, by your others in the society. So where the idea of what is religious is learned when one is a child in the process of socialization. But whether one is a believer or non-believer is something that one gets when one grows up as an adult. So this shift from childhood religiosity to kind of taking on atheism is something that needs to be addressed when we look into sociology of religion. Now, when we understand atheism, we need to understand that atheism could be in terms of happening at an adult life. So, you have already been accustomed to a set of idea of a particular religion. So, in order to kind of consider yourself as a religious or non-religious, they have to leave the religion. So, the study of living religion has taken a central seat in sociology of religion, and this is more in the Western countries, especially US, where the membership of church and other religious sects has declined, and therefore a number of scholars and a number of research groups have started kind of trying to figure out why the membership has declined, and does the decline in membership indicate that individuals are leaving a particular religion. So it has been generally associated with irreligiosity, agnosticism, and atheism. Sociologists who study this idea of leaving one religion are kind of already going on with the assumptions that atheists or agnostics are the people who have left the religion, but then they are kind of trying to understand this shift from the old belief before you left the religion to kind of shifting to believing in atheism. Social factors are important in both staying in and leaving religion, because since it's a part of a socialization process, and we kind of learn the way in which it has been taught to us, once we are kind of growing up, we kind of start questioning it. And if we look into Christianity, there were kind of lot of pedophilia scandals when the kind of Reformation and the Protestant movements were there. Lot of critique in terms of trying to understand the way in which church kind of had become deviated from its social functions and had become corrupt. So therefore it kind of idea of individual leaving a religion or coming back to it is dependent on the context. When we look into this phrase of leaving religion, we try to understand it in 4 overlapping phases. The first phase is during the 1960s, and this focused on the decline in religious affiliation in Western Europe, North America. The research was closely related to studies about secularization, unbelief, irreligiosity in modern Western and primary Christian societies. The second is during the 1970s, and it kind of peaked up in 1980s. The process included existing the only Christians and Jewish group, but also new religious movement. Now, this new religious movement was a phenomenon in the 1890s across the globe, where people kind of started forming association sects which would kind of be more liberal than what was earlier considered. The third phase was in the 90s and the 2010, and here the focus was living based on case studies. But the focus was more or less, because much of the research was coming in from the Western society, the focus was on Christianity, Judaism, and the new religious movement. The fourth phase is from 210, and here the interest is different religious traditions such as Islam and Orthodox Judaism. They were kind of growing and combined with a theoretical development based on empirical fieldwork. So when we look into these phases, which is kind of more or less not watertight, but they are overlapping, we kind of understand that the concept of leaving religion, or the whole idea of the two kind of ideas, people who believe in it, in theism, that is, you believe in the existence of a powerful force which is kind of going to control social life, and the others who kind of question the existence of any divine or any kind of deity. So there's a very thin line in terms of trying to understand faith and non-faith, religion and non-religion. So this is a kind of a new ideas, and not much research has been done in the understanding of atheism, but as kind of part of sociology discipline, it is important to understand, because it will then help us understand the economic, political and social milieu in which we are growing and living. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.